I found this model's picture on Pinterest. I thought her features were unique, so I decided to paint her. As a mixed media artist educator, it is important to be proficient in several different art media. With that being said, I thought it was time for me to give India ink a try. Here is a freehand contoured line sketch of the reference photo. And this is how I drew the photo. First, I drew a large oval and included her hair. Then I drew in the hairline to separate her head from her natural afro. I divided her face into sections to use a guideline for the eyes, nose, ears, and lips. Remember, the corners of the eyes must line up with the edge of the top of the ears. And the bottom of the nose should line up with the bottom of the ears. The corners of the lips should line up with the middle of the eyes. If you follow these guidelines, your portrait should be proportionate. Then I drew in the eyes, nose, ears, and lips. Once her face is complete, now I'm ready to paint. In this painting, I decided to use the India ink similar to watercolor. I dropped the colors I wanted to use in the palette. I thought for my first attempt of trying this, we would just learn how to use the media together as a monochromatic portrait. In the beginning, I was able to paint with the ink almost like watercolor, working light to dark, building up the layers of value by simply adding water to the ink so that the color is lighter and less water for a darker value. Now here's where I felt I messed up, was her turtleneck collar. The India ink without water was almost the exact color I needed for her turtleneck, so I applied it straight on. However, at the time, I did not know I could not build a darker value with the India ink by simply adding more ink. This is one way ink is different from watercolor. With India ink, once you apply the ink directly, that is as dark as it gets. So from that point on, I had difficulty adding value for that area. With the earrings, I applied the gold ink directly so that it could stand out. I decided to slow down the video so that you can see this painting took me several hours to complete, and in real time, each stroke was carefully applied in order to create the values and details on her skin and facial features. Here's a tip. When painting, shading, or coloring a form, always move your brush or pencil in the direction of which the three-dimensional form is. Notice I painted the forehead horizontal and curved, and the cheeks diagonal and curved. Remember the planes of the face. Break each object down into shapes and forms. This will make the face look more realistic. Just imagine how flat her face would look if I painted the entire face vertical, as if I was painting a wall. You should always shake a bottle of ink before you open it to make sure it's mixed up well. It's important to paint in the direction of the type of texture or form that you want to create. In this specific part, I'm adding layers of water and India ink in order to create the value and depth in her hair. We must be patient with watercolor and India ink. Remember to work light to dark. If you apply too much paint too soon, it may be difficult to add water, just like I did here. So you must add the water before the paint dries in order to create the appropriate value. Since her turtleneck was so dark, I had to balance things out, so I went ahead and made her hair a lot darker. But unlike the turtleneck, I added some water to create value and depth. So with the hair, I'm using some ink that is watered down, and some areas is just ink for the darker values. Then I added the darker values for the ears, eyelids, eyebrows, nose, and lips. When using watercolor or India ink like watercolor, it is extremely important to build up the layers of value. Be careful not to go too dark too soon, like I did with the turtleneck. I cut out a lot of the layering in the video so that I don't bore you. But just so you know, I actually built up at least 3 times on her face in order to achieve this level of value on her skin. This process can take a long time, but it's worth it in the long run. I painted the background with watered down turquoise ink. I thought it would be a good contrast to the rest of the painting. Now on to the details of the eyes. The base coat of the eyes was watered down ink. Then I added her freckles with just drops of ink from the tip of a detailed brush. By this stage, I was not pleased with the outcome of the portrait, and I had determined that the India ink is not a media I would ever want to use just alone by itself, like I would with watercolor. I felt the portrait needed help, and that color pencils would give me the details and values I wanted to add in her eyes. So I started swatching my colors and sharpening the pencils. I highly recommend swatching color pencils before using them so you can see the different values and how they would look blended together on a separate piece of paper before coloring on your final piece. When coloring and blending with color pencils, it is also important for the tips of your pencil to be sharp in order to refine the look of small details. I added value and details with the Prismacolor color pencils throughout her eyes, shoulders, and parts of her face. Honestly, I wanted to color the whole portrait with color pencils, and I had to stop myself because I had to remember this is a lesson on India ink. Next, this turtleneck was still bothering me because the color was so flat. I tried to add color pencil over it to create value, but the texture of the ink and color pencils just did not blend well together on the turtleneck. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? You see, this is where you have to start getting creative and thinking of a solution to your design problem. I did not want to accept defeat and just say, lesson learned, better luck next time. Instead, I decided to embrace my mistake and make it look like I did it on purpose. So these are my options. I could find some scrapbook or fabric paper and collage over it. I looked and I couldn't find anything that I liked. Option 2, I could pull out the acrylic paints and paint over it with value and make it look realistic. That would just take too much time, and by this point, I was over this portrait and I was ready to be done. Option 3, I could embrace the flatness as if I did it on purpose and add a pattern, which is a principle of art, and color in the pattern with a stencil and paint marker. Okay, that's it. Quick and simple. Problem solved. Last and finally, I added some texture, value, and details in her hair. Now it's your turn. I would love to see what you create with India ink. Please share your experience with the photo in the comments below. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you like this video. Thanks for watching. Bye, y'all.